Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, Maddie asked me to just sort of start at the beginning and talk about what are the medical leaves and accommodations you might be required to provide in your organization, in your state, in your county, in your city. So, we're going to just start doing some overviews. And if you want more detail about any one of these regulations, let us know. We'll be happy to do just a deep dive into just FMLA by itself. It's going to be what are the things that I'm aware of that you want to pay attention to when you're implementing them from the perspective of compliance with the regulation, but also other regulations and the things they might run concurrent with by regulation. So we can do that if you're interested. We do that in our 2-day deep dive ultimate guide workshop, which we're going to be doing in October in Chicago for the high level USA. And we'll talk about the 13 different states that have all this stuff going on. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So let's start with just a slide about what are all the regulations that you really need to pay attention to in the United States that have to do with medical leaves and accommodations. So we're going to go ahead and bring up the Venn diagram. And this Venn diagram represents how regulations run concurrently and how they run separately. And what you'll notice is most of these regulations in the United States, they run concurrently, but they don't in each state. So you really need to pay attention to your state regulations. But the American with Disabilities Act, we now have the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act that lays over everything, everybody. And can Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act run concurrent to Family Medical Leave Act? Then we've got pregnancy disability that may be just the Pregnancy Fairness Act. Are you making sure you're paying attention to people who are disabled and not discriminating against them? That's a high level regulation that we've had for a long time. Well, now we know we don't mess with pregnant women. And so we have an ADA regulation. And most of you have a state regulation that's even more protective and longer. And many of you have a state FMLA regulation for baby bonding only that adds another 12 weeks of leave just for baby bonding for both the father and the mother. And then we've got workers' compensation. And workers' compensation is not in all states, but it is a huge regulation that we pay attention to very carefully in states that it exists in. So what are your high-level regulations for leave and accommodation in the United States? The Family Medical Leave Act. So what are the high-level federal regulations we are paying attention to for medical leaves and accommodations? We're starting with the Family Medical Leave Act. And let's look at military leave first. You can have 12 weeks for extingency. That's going to give you leave for taking over the bookkeeping and making sure the daycare is under control and taking care of life again with that partner gone. And then we've got another 12 weeks if you are a military veteran, and you've got leave for up to 26 weeks together. That's FMLA. Everything else is 12 weeks under FMLA, including baby bonding, and it all runs concurrently. Once you're eligible, and there's a document you can use online that's pretty standardized at the federal level, but it's not compliant with all states because in California, you can't ask for the underlying medical condition. But the other issues that we're talking about with FMLA leave are, does it run concurrent to anything else? And yes, it does. Workers' comp, potentially ADA leave on site, and I'm only gone part of the day, in a reduced work schedule or intermittently. And it could run concurrent with Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. And that's a very delicate area of understanding because we now have the ADA next. And the ADA is, well, if you qualify, not just a serious health condition, you have to qualify. And yes, ADA is a work regulation and FMLA is a leave regulation. So if you're going to qualify for ADA, it's because I know when you're coming back to work to perform those functions of your job, that accommodation is allowing you to do. That's a very important issue. And Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act could run concurrent to FMLA, because with Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, it's not just a qualified individual with a disability who can perform all the essential functions of the job with the accommodation, including a real return to work date, because ADA is a work regulation. But also, if you're pregnant, we don't mess with pregnant women. And do you have something that's impacting you? Well, you could have something that's impacting you under Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act that is not a qualifying disability, or even could be considered a disability or a serious health condition under FMLA. So we can't run FMLA and Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act concurrently if both criteria are not met. However, your employee gets those documents filled out. They take that FMLA certificate to their doctor. And when they let the doctor know then and explain how this is a serious health condition together, they decide that they can get FMLA because they're giving you a certificate that tells you, yes, they consider this impacted pregnancy under Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act to actually be a serious health condition under FMLA. And the significance of that is because then I can get my medical benefits continued, because ADA does not protect them, neither does Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. And so these are how the regulations run concurrently, impact each other. And boy, do you want to pay attention to that stuff, even if you have a third-party administrator, because they will not be. ADA, Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, is by employee, by job, by disability, by responsibility, by shift, by commute, by level of supervisory need. Make sure you're paying attention and you are involved in that process if that's your job. So then we get to the other issues of the American with Disabilities Act. We know what they are. They always run concurrent to workers' comp, ADA, or FMLA, until you have exhausted or you're not eligible for FMLA, or you've determined you're not a qualified individual with a disability under the American with Disabilities Act. And of course, you're not pregnant. And I'm on workers' comp. Now I'm posting your job because I put you in an active status or reduced work schedule in our company policy. And then we get to organ donor and bone marrow, another leave you pay attention to. And finally, pregnancy. So Pregnancy Fairness Act is you don't discriminate against. We don't retaliate. This is a part of the Title VII. But when we're talking about the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, it is a different issue, because now we're making sure that we are absolutely accommodating you, even if you can't perform all those essential functions, which means we're going to be hopping into FMLA for all the leave anyway. And then there's organ donor and bone marrow leave. So now, on top of these issues that deal with pregnancy, deal with workers on the job injury, deal with FMLA for all the different variations of that, including pregnancy and baby bonding at the federal level and at the ADA, what are the company policies? On top of the state policies you have to have, what are the company specific policies that you get to choose to have that impact your workforce? So on top of the federal policies and the state policies that you must have, what are the state policies or other insurance policies or other things that you could choose to have? How must you modify your federal compliance because of the state version of the ADA in California? There's a Washington version. There's a New York version. Family medical leave, pregnancy disability leave. These are state policies you don't get a choice on, and they run concurrent to some, and they have criteria for a number of employees that you have to pay attention to. That's what our integrated medical leave and accommodation management training is all about in the trenches, is so you learn how these state and federal regulations integrate, so you know what you need to know and you know what you don't know, so you get help when you need it. But add on top of that your company policies. So you can have all the state and federal stuff down pat, and then you get a new job in a new industry with new safety regulations, new IIPP programs, new company policies that provide more leave. Does it run concurrent? That provides protection for military and pregnancy. Does it run concurrent? These are the things that are going to matter at that level. So now we're talking about how your company leaves run concurrent with some of these leaves, how the state leaves run concurrent with some of these leaves. And then on top of that, you have insurance benefits. Now you have ways that people get paid, state ways to get paid because you're medically impacted, state ways you get paid because you're taking care of a family member. But it has nothing to do with whether your job is protected depending on the state you're in. And these are changing a lot, so pay attention. And then you have long-term disability and short-term disability. And that's a company choice, but whether they get it or not has nothing to do with their eligibility of any of the other federal or state regulations. Take a look at what your company policy says. You see, now we're integrating again. We're integrating the policies you have with the insurance policies you choose to buy. This includes medical benefits because ADA doesn't continue it. FMLA does. When FMLA ends, please don't continue medical benefits unless you've got a company policy to do that. And then it's thought out and you made that choice as a benefit. But these are the details that'll matter. So what we want to help you do to remember and just think about the challenges at these three levels. You've got a federal level compliance regulation that's pretty consistent once it changes. We have courts across the country that then litigate these and come up with solutions by region that we pay attention to. But then we've got a state version of some of these regulations, and you need to know by state whether you have these or not. And those change often more rapidly, especially if you're in California. And then we've got the FMLA, and we've got a FMLA version of that. And they change more often sometimes. So then you've got the federal version, the state version, and now you've got your company policies. They lay over whatever you're doing as long as they don't violate a state or federal regulation. For example, a sick leave policy says you don't get to get paid sick leave unless you call 30 minutes before. FMLA doesn't change that unless somehow you've accommodated them to not have to call in for sick leave because they are protected under ADA and FMLA simultaneously, because the nature of the disability disclosed is OCD and they run out of time and they don't get enough time to call you on time. That's integrated medical leave and accommodation, everybody. And yeah, that's perfect. Of course we'll do that. It sounds difficult, but not so much. Not once you start getting a system in place. So we're all about showing you how to create an integrated medical leave and accommodation management system. And then on top of that, if you're a union shop, you've got union policies. They dictate who can get jobs and when you are no longer able to accommodate under their usual and customary job, and you've determined it's an undue hardship to provide them leave to keep that job open, and you've posted that job because ADA accommodation for that job has been denied. Don't post it before. And now you're looking at any of their job in your union shop. So they want this job, but they don't get it. Now you could ask the union, but that's not what we typically do. And it could take a long time. So now we're looking at every other job, and now we are now going to the next steps with that. So now how do your policies impact that? What is your procedure for doing that? Have you created that in your process? And a union shop will impact some of those choices. They also have policies typically that prevent you from running FMLA and workers' comp together. So you need to be careful and watch those things. So now that you've identified your federal level and you've identified your state level, You know what your company policies are, including your return to work policies and your policies for functional capacity evaluations and your sick policies and your vacation policies and all those policies that impact how you get paid, how you take leave. Do you have a medical personal leave policy? Does your policy manual say that all those leaves run concurrent unless protected by state or federal regulation? That's a good statement to have in your policy manual across the board for everybody. So these are the high level issues that you're dealing with when you're creating an integrated medical leave and accommodation management system in any organization you walk into with that level of responsibility. Whether you're overseeing or not, this is what I would be auditing in that organization. What are those procedures? And we call those SOPs, standard operating procedures. What are those that we use to implement all these federal policies, all these state policies, how they integrate with our required state regulations like workers' comp, our company policies, and our union contracts, because that's where the lawsuits happen. And they're typically called a wrongful termination or constructive discharge for failure to accommodate, failure to engage, failure to protect, failure to train, retaliation. This is what we see. So our job has always been to teach you how to be your own expert and understand the next level of nuance beyond what the compliance requirements are and how they integrate with each other. So let's just bring up the picture of the state of California so you can see how complex this really can get. In the state of California, you have so many regulations that are occurring at the same time. And these are not all the reasons you can be out on leave, everybody, but the reasons that you can be protected. And they don't run concurrently. That's why that's a Venn diagram. That represents when these don't run concurrently and when they do. And your states, if you have these regulations that are state specific, will have the same challenge. So you want to understand that and know that and use something like that to help your employees understand it. And I'll tell you what, if you're watching this video and you want a Venn diagram of your state or even your city in your state, we're doing it anyway for our ADA conference next week. But ask us, and we're happy to send you the USA. Just ask us. So we're here to help. We're here to help you, if you're interested, to take on the role of the person most knowledgeable of understanding how your company integrates with your employees and your potential applicants on providing family medical leave and American with Disabilities Act protection, including all the related regulations that are impacted by these regulations, with your company policies, with your state and city issue ordinances also, and your union contracts. And let's not forget the Injury, Illness, and Prevention Program. Let's not forget OSHA. They are sometimes the reason we have an undue hardship, because we can't accommodate that type of restriction. It would cause a safety problem. So this is real stuff, everybody. And let's get better at it and more knowledgeable so we really do understand how to help that employee if we can possibly keep them employed. And if we can't, let's work on it together till we know that together. And let's make sure they get all the benefits they should get and not twice as many as they should, because we are not running things concurrently that we can. So I hope that's not too much information. I'm trying to slow down, but send in your clarification questions, because then we'll use this medium to answer them for you. And check out our integrated medical leave and accommodation management in the trenches workshop, because that's what it's for. The people are in the trenches doing this work. We'll see you in Chicago. Thanks, everybody. Bye.